Hour number 3, Friday afternoon, getting ready for the weekend. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. Jeff Striegel of the Motor Racing Network coming up at 4:30. We'll get the latest on NASCAR, headed to Kansas Speedway, just south of here a little bit. See what security looks like and what he expects from the race. Some specially painted cars. The Michael Waltrip racing cars will have numbers commemorating the Boston bombings.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty sweet.
Turned that around. The numbers will actually look like the pinned-on back numbers that they put on marathon runners. So we'll talk to Jeff about that coming up at 4:30. We also have to get into the NFL schedule being released and a bunch of other stuff. But right now, we are joined by Josh Harvey of Big Red Report, BigRedReport.com. Josh, how you doing, bud?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Talk to me about this offseason. You know, we broke down Taylor Martinez a little bit. He's back working with Steve Calhoun as quarterback guru. They've gone through the spring. They had the spring game. I think the offense looks deep and loaded and an awful lot of positions, and I don't feel like I'm any closer to an answer on defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's got to be one of your priorities. I think one of your priorities has to be getting those young guys into the film room, just because I think that's defensive awareness. Those guys, they need as much time in that film room as they can, and those older classmen, they really have to stress that to those younger guys. They got to let their eyes on this defense, and they got to see more scenarios and whatnot, because the case is going to be that Nebraska is going to play a lot younger group on defense this year, and you just expect that defensive awareness, that defensive IQ to drop. And I think they have the athleticism to make up for it if it doesn't drop too far. And so I really think, can you simulate a game? No. But I think the more time they spend in that classroom, the better for the defensive side of the ball.
What about the coaches, Josh? You know, what do you think their off-season of work looks like? Because obviously they're going to have to recruit. They're going to have to do some other things. They can't focus solely on a game plan. How do you think that they go about their process at this off-season?
Well, I think I wonder on defense, what kind of adjustments they make coming out of the spring, knowing, hey, this is kind of what we had this spring. This is where we think we can get to them at some point, before the Big Ten play. So what do we need to do? What do we need to adjust? That's at least one area I'm hoping they do. I know you mentioned recruiting too. The coaches they're going to have to recruit because they only have one commitment at this point. So they're definitely going to have to use the summer to recruit pretty heavily. Can that consume all your time? No, but when you only have one recruit and it's May and you're probably going to take a class around 2021, you're definitely going to have to pay attention in that area.
Do you think that Tim Beck changes that offensive play calling? Because Taylor said he wants to throw the ball about 30 times a game. Could a 55-45 run-to-pass ratio work, or does that number need to be something more around 60-65% run?
No, I mean, I would hope that it's 50-50. I mean, I think Nebraska's obviously shown they run the football probably more effectively, but at the same time, when you have a senior quarterback, and even more importantly, when you have the wide receivers that you do, I think you can air it out at times. I'm not expecting them to go to a 60% pass ratio or anything like that. But would I be surprised if Taylor's chucking the ball around 3 or 4 more times a game than he was last year on average? Not at all. Not whatsoever.
Talking here to Josh Harvey of Big Red Report and BigRedReport.com. And, with regards to the offseason and the emphasis on recruiting, I just read an analysis with the ESPN 150 being released, and you've got guys that are getting commits earlier and earlier and earlier. How important do you think it is that they get in on that part of the recruiting process? Because that is not typically how this Nebraska staff is recruited.
Well, yeah, I will say this. I don't know how much it is their fault, because I think when you break down those teams that have a lot of commitments at this point, a lot of them are coming from their backyard. And Nebraska they don't really have that. I mean, could there be maybe 4 players that get an offer from Nebraska this year that are in the state? Yes. But you're not going to be able to fill a class here. And ultimately, it's tough to get too many commitments at this point in the game, because if you're recruiting Kansas City, Chicago, St. Louis, a lot of those kids, they aren't going to be able to. The earliest they're going to be able to come in is for that spring game, and if they can't come in for that spring game, then probably the earliest they're going to be able to come in is right after the summer, because these kids have school and whatnot, and to travel all the way to Nebraska, it takes some requirements. And so I think ultimately that, it's one of the geographical hindrances they have. You're just not going to see a ton of recruits, but that's why I think they have to make up for it in the summer when kids' schedules lighten up a little bit and they can get into town. And that's why you'll always see Nebraska. You'll never see Nebraska have a full class, say, before the fall, when like some schools do with official visitors. They rely on those official visitors. They also want to use the game day atmosphere to try and draw in kids. But at this point, with only having one, I do think their summer's going to be a little busier than maybe in previous years.
Josh Harvey of Big Red Report, BigRedReport.com. I know you keep in touch with recruits, obviously, throughout the season. What about the spring game? What kind of effect did that have? Because I know they had some visitors.
Yeah, they did have some visitors. I wouldn't classify the list of visitors as maybe as good as in some years. There wasn't any of these big-time 4- or 5-star players. I think a lot of it because of the challenges that I just mentioned a little bit ago. But the kids that were in, they were impressed. They were impressed with the crowd. They were impressed with Jack's run. I think ultimately, I think it was a good experience, and it always is when you can get them in for a spring game and then they turn on the TV and see somebody else's spring game, or they go to another spring game the following weekend. They see, what Nebraska, has behind them, what kind of support. But ultimately this year, the class that they brought in for that spring game just wasn't quite as strong as in previous years. And so I think that's why Big Red Weekend, which will be coming in June, will, they had a lot of momentum after that weekend last year, and I think they're going to have to use that again this year.
Is Jack's run one of those things that can really stick with recruits? Can they use that as like a gem to really pull them towards Nebraska?
I don't know necessarily with recruits specifically, but obviously any news is good news. I think that positive, them seeing Nebraska, that bodes well. But I think parent-wise too, I think a parent will sit back and go, man, it looks like they're doing things right in Nebraska. Maybe I should tell Johnny to check them out a little bit more. And so I don't know necessarily as far as the recruit itself, how much of an impact it will have besides the promotion. But I think you probably touched a lot of parents there with that moment.
Well, and I did think it was interesting because right here on 590, we've got SVP and Rosillo, who just 2 or 3 weeks ago deemed Nebraska fans to be the most unrealistic or whatever. What was it? I can't even remember what verbiage they used.
I think it was delusional.
Delusional, yeah, the most delusional fans in college football. And then they turn around and in 2-3 weeks' time, they see the spring game and what went down and how things went, singing the praises of the program and really kind of reinforcing everything they thought was good and right about Nebraska football and college football.
Yeah, obviously I didn't hear them. I don't know when their first comments. Obviously, when you, as a person who's not been here his entire career and whatnot, when I heard of Nebraska, I always heard the most positive things. That's one of the things that drew me here. And so, were they talking delusional as far as expectations? Well, yeah, maybe. You get rid of a coach after 9-win season in Solich. Bo has 9 wins after 9 wins after 9 wins in 5 straight years, and he's so-called on the fan hot seat by some. And so I don't know if they were talking delusional there, but it's no doubt when you're talking about a fan base that loves their football and will do pretty much anything to support their football team, that definitely is the state of Nebraska.
Josh Harvey, Big Red Report, BigRedReport.com. Keep track of all of the off-season headlines, recruiting news, and more at Big Red Report. Josh, thanks for the time, bud. Enjoy your weekend.
Hey, not a problem, guys. Talk to you later.
All right, coming up, we've got Jeff Striegel of the Motor Racing Network at 4:30. We talk a little NFL schedule release, NBA playoffs, and, of course, the entire city of Boston is closed right now. We'll talk about that, too.
AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio.